everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making a video talking a little bit about our background and where we came from. We've had some people asking about that, being interested about that, so we thought it might be helpful to kind of have a video where we explain kind of where we grew up.
Well, also just kind of like how we got here.
Yeah, how we got here, all those different things. So
yeah, so American family hopping on a plane to Istanbul to Moscow. That's not quite the norm. So
that's not very normal. So yeah, we just want to kind of do a video where we explain a little bit where we came from, and yeah.
I grew up mostly in the Southeast, so the Carolinas, North and South Carolinas, most of my life. My family was very traditional. My father is actually a minister, raised with a lot of traditional values, all those kind of things. I went off to university and I ended up studying Russian kind of on a whim, actually. But I did take that in college. There was actually a lecture given by the head of the Arabic department. I was thinking about taking Arabic, and I went to actually a military college, so it was kind of our basic training, and most of us all took the same thing in our first years, but they did let us at least request which language we wanted to take, so they had us like sit through these different little presentations from the different languages. So I was planning to take Arabic because it was an army college, it's an American army. Everyone's taking Arabic back then. Where was the U.S. military at that time? I'll let you connect the dots on that one. The Arabic professor gave a little presentation thing, talked to us, and he gave this like super inspiring talk about how you should study a language, where you want to learn about its culture, its literature, all these different things. He wants to have students who want to read the Quran in its original, or enthralled by the sands of Saudi Arabia and want to study the literature, the poetry, all these things. He gave this great, inspiring talk, and I was like, that's really inspiring. I don't really care to do any of those things in Arabic, so I walked out of there and I went, he makes a good point though. What's one of the languages here where I could imagine at least finding the literature or something like that interesting, and that might motivate me? I kind of looked down the list, and I'm like, okay, let me sit in on the Russian presentation and see what that one's about. And I sat in on that one. It's like, and I thought, this lines up more. I know nothing about it. I'm an American, but this still somehow sounds more interesting. And so the Arabic guy gave such a good presentation that I decided to not take Arabic, and I just signed up for Russian when I was there. I studied that it was really only a year I was there, and then I decided I didn't want to go full time into the army. And so at the end of your second year at this institution, you had the opportunity to choose to leave and not commit to stay and go in. So I left at the end of my second year into a normal civilian university. That second year, I was just very conflicted. It was just kind of a lot of stuff with the U.S. government, things like that, were causing me to just be very uncomfortable with committing to going into the army, and because I'd been thinking almost like a career path, because you would go into there as an officer from the university, and so I just was not comfortable with that. I was actually quite depressed about the idea of going in, having a really rough time with that idea, and I decided I wasn't going to commit and was going to leave. And so I went and transferred into a normal civilian university. I ended up at Chapel Hill in North Carolina. I had been majoring in studying math, technically, while I was still with the military academy. And so I was honestly just very sick of math and engineering. So when I got there, I literally thought, well, I took a year of Russian. Let me just keep taking it. So I just went and signed up with their Department of Germanic and Slavic languages. It was a combined department of the Germanic and Slavic languages. And I ended up majoring in Russian literature and language. So the 2 years I was there, I was taking mostly classes that were Russian literature, maybe a little bit of history and language, that kind of stuff. So I got pretty well exposed to it. And then that eventually led into how we met. Then between my junior and senior year, I ended up, I wanted to go to Eastern Europe and get a place where I could actually practice some Russian in a Russian-speaking context. I had never even been anywhere outside the U.S. other than Canada at that point. And so I initially was actually looking at like Kazakhstan. That fell through. And so I ended up spending the summer between my junior and senior year in Ukraine, but in a Russian-speaking city in Ukraine. So I ended up spending 2 months there. There was like an American missionary organization type thing. So when I came, I was primarily just helping to teach English. They had some like English camps, stuff like that, English clubs and things. So when I came over, I'll be honest, I was really wanting to practice the Russian. That was a big part of why I was there. So I was primarily just helping teach English and then kind of practicing Russian with the people. We'd make friends with people, hang out, and also do then. They were learning English and I'd be learning Russian because we'd be kind of meeting in the middle. I'd try to speak Russian while they'd be trying to speak English with me. They were very beginners in English. It would work out like that. And actually, so that's how we ended up meeting.
So a little bit about where I came from. I am American. My parents are both American. I was born in the U.S., but my parents decided to move to Ukraine to teach in an English-speaking school there. And so I actually grew up in Ukraine for most of my life. However, I was educated in English, and so I'm actually not as fluent in Russian as I would like to be, but that's why my pronunciation is a little bit better than what would be typical for an American learning Russian, just because of the fact that I just was there when I was so young. Like, all my friends spoke English, my closest friends spoke English, all my education was in English, and so really, I didn't really integrate like I would have liked to, and so we, for our own children, would like them to integrate better than I was integrated, which is why there are many things I should know that I don't know, many words I should know that I don't know. My grammar is poor, stuff like that, even though I lived in Ukraine for so long, just because of the fact that I was raised in this little English-speaking bubble. And like I said, that's not something we want for our children. We want them to integrate. We want them to learn the language.
Yeah.
So if anything, I would say my background has made us more passionate about the idea that it's important to integrate. It's important to actually become part of the culture, learn the language, do your best with all of that, because of the fact that I don't want my kids to end up like me, where they grow up and don't even really feel like they fit in at all.
And it is funny that I was kind of having to laugh earlier. It's kind of, we have the weirdest interplay when it comes to it because, just funny back and forth though, because she says something, it sounds perfect, but then has to look at me and go, what the heck am I supposed to do about the grammar with that? I've got no, she'll be trying to write a text and be like, I have no idea what case to use on this. Yeah. It's very funny, our interplay back and forth. Yeah, there's just funny times like that where it's like they can't understand me, but they can understand her fine in terms of they can understand the words she's saying. But then she'll say something, they'll be like,
completely wrong.
And I'll be sitting here and like, it's because the grammar's all mixed up. It's saying the opposite of what you're trying to say. That's why he's confused.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically. The way we met was I volunteered to teach at an English camp. The same one he volunteered to teach at. And because I already knew some Russian, not perfectly at all, but I already knew some Russian, and because he was one of the only Americans coming in who also knew some Russian, we were paired up to teach the beginner's class. And so that's how we met.
Yeah, spent a lot of time together, and then I went back to the States. We kept in contact, so we were long distance for the first part of our time, and then she eventually came back to the U.S. Really only a year or so later, we ended up getting married when we came back to the U.S. But I finished college, had a down year that I was just working. Then I went into a PhD program. It was like a combined master's PhD program with the Russian department. Ohio State was there. And I got a fellowship to go do that. So we went ahead and got married. I spent a year with that program. Didn't care for it very much because the emphasis was very much on it was very much on the literature side. I wasn't as interested in it. I wanted to get to a point where it's like I could speak the Russian. Yes. I cared more, like on the academic side, I probably did care more about the history type stuff. Like I'd majored in Russian literature basically in undergraduate, so I could, I'd read plenty of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, so I'm very familiar with Russian literature in that sense, but I wasn't really feeling a 5-6 years PhD into the literature thing. So I ended up transferring out to a master's program with Middlebury College, which is really the best college in the U.S. when it comes to really learning the languages, getting to fluency. So I went into their master's program. So definitely improved a whole lot on the speaking. So even though in Middlebury, I still kind of more or less had a master's that was sort of like Russian literature and history a bit, it was way more focused on doing everything in Russian, basically live using it and things like that. I wasn't as motivated to spend all my time just strictly reading Dostoevsky in Russian, which I did plenty of. I've gotten through a lot of his books in Russian with not using English, but but still, that wasn't really my priority. So I ended up going to Middlebury on that one. In that program, I had a semester abroad, which actually was in Moscow. So we were in Moscow it was 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
Because we were here for 2 months normal, and then COVID hit. So
Yeah.
we were in Moscow for like 2 months living normally.
Yeah.
I was going to the, I think it was a Middlebury program, but I think we were hosted by the Higher School of Economics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go there every day and do some classes, really more Middlebury classes that were just kind of being hosted there, but still, yeah. So we had that, and then she taught at an English school for that month because she wasn't in the master's program. I was just doing it, but she came along and then taught English with a school here to keep busy while we were here. And then when we were here, we kind of had the thinking of, we really like it here. In terms of just being traditional Christians, things like that, we kind of looked around and started thinking, I was like, if we had kids, I think I'd rather do it here. The absolute floodgates of insanity had already opened at that point, right? In the kind of the midst of the Trump presidency, and especially all the stuff kind of leading into the pandemic time period and everything else, things really got crazy. So it was strongly started to be on our mind from the first time we lived here. I actually was finishing up the master's in Russian, going straight into a seminary master's degree program. So we went back home, ended up going to Philadelphia for a year through my master's that I was working on through the seminary program, kind of looking at wanting to teach down the road, do like the seminary program, hopefully maybe go on to like a PhD in something like church history or something like that. I'm interested more in history. And then maybe seeing if I could then turn that into some sort of teaching or something, or if we kept it with the Russian, maybe be able to then come back at some point and teach somewhere in Russia at some point. It was a bit nebulous, but it was kind of just sort of flowing where the interest was. I was working and taking classes. COVID hit, so then I didn't really get to do many of those classes in person. We moved to Philadelphia to be right there where the classes could be, and then then they all of a sudden all went online. But and then with all the stuff with COVID and all, I ended up giving up the job I had there. We ended up moving back to the South where it was cheaper to live. I kept going with some of the seminary stuff online because it was already online anyway. We ended up coming down to South Carolina, had our first kid, then 2 more. And so I ended up spending the next couple of years working for a tech company. So I guess I could say I worked for big tech for a while. It's one of the only somewhat conservative big tech companies I could even think of. It was a great job. It was a good place and all that. But I kind of had to put the seminary stuff on hold just because things with the economy, the cost of living just skyrocketed. Juggle a couple of part-time jobs and do the seminary stuff just wasn't enough on that. So I had to kind of put the seminary on hold, go into the tech stuff. And then things in the last few years just, like we said, as traditional Christians, it just kept getting worse and worse. And we had the kids, and we'd already talked about saying we were going to seriously consider going back to, like, say, Moscow again if we had kids. And as things got crazier and crazier, that's what got us thinking that way. I think we've already kind of touched on a little bit of the actual process, or we will and we'll probably can talk more on that, but that still kind of gets us up to in our lives where we got to that point.
Yeah, and that's when we decided there's more to that story, which we can share later, but that's when we decided to go ahead and move to Russia and Moscow specifically, just because we'd been here before and it was at least familiar. Yeah, so we're very excited to be here, and we're very excited to be able to share our experience with all of you guys. And we want to thank you again for everything you guys do, for watching, for sharing, for liking, and we really, really appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because we are planning on having more fun stuff coming up in the future.
I think she would normally say that we have a boosty or something like that, so don't feel any obligation, but we're always grateful. Argue in the comments, all the different things.
But be nice.
We always appreciate it. We love the interaction, all that. We'll try to get to responding to some comments. We've been swamped for the last week or so now.
Yes.
We're trying. We're getting to it.
We're really trying. We're really trying hard. And also we have our email address down below, as well as information about our immigration lawyer. If any of you guys are interested in moving, you can contact him. And also, we are not lawyers, but we would be happy to hear from you guys and answer any questions you guys have. So
no legal advice ever will be given.
No legal advice.
But sharing our experiences, we can definitely handle that.
Yes, we can handle that. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys very soon. Bye.
Bye.